Dear BrotherBored, I've only recently started playing diplomacy and really enjoy reading your blog. It has already helped me a lot. I'm about to win my third game after having a 3-player draw and a solo win. Just friends games so far though. I have the problem where I tend to keep thinking about my next move until deep into the night, well beyond my intended bedtime. When I think about the game, it usually involves me visualizing alternative moves that I hadn't thought of before and how those would affect the game. Maybe it's because I'm a beginner? I have also caught myself thinking about an ongoing game while I was trying to spend quality time with my family on a weekend. Me getting lost in thought like this seemed to be most common during a tense but exciting phase of my current game when the outcome was uncertain. Are there any tips you can share about how you are able to leave the game behind you, or not, during times of your choosing? Thanks so much, Deveron. Yes. Most tabletop games last a couple of hours. Win or lose, the whole game experience lasts about as long as a movie. If a typical tabletop game involves the same commitment as watching a movie, joining an online diplomacy match is like signing up for a 3 days per week semester-long college course. Online diplomacy matches are strange, even unique among online board games, because one match can stretch out over several months. Let me explain to the uninitiated. Most online diplomacy matches are played with time-limited turns, typically set somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. A cycle of turn phases in diplomacy is called a year, and an in-game year lasts from 2 to 5 turns, depending on whether there are retreats and builds. A well-played match of diplomacy typically lasts more than 10 in-game years, often well into the higher teens. This means your average match of online diplomacy takes over a month to finish, many taking 2 to 4 months to finish. If the players take any breaks, the match might last half a year. At the time I am making this video, the third and final round of the 2019 Online Diplomacy Championship, a tournament which started in spring of 2019, is still not finished in September of 2020, over a year and a half real-world years after the tournament started. I, your bored brother, am a finalist in this ongoing tournament. Since the 2019 Online Diplomacy Championship started, I changed jobs twice, got married, became an uncle, and weathered a pandemic. The tournament feels to me like it started in another lifetime. So, dear viewer, perhaps you can understand why my friend Deveron might struggle with his diplomacy games intruding on his thoughts when he's trying to get to sleep, or trying to spend time with his family. When you join an online diplomacy match, it becomes a part of your life for a while. Deveron, this phenomenon has nothing to do with your being a beginner. I, your bored brother, have played online diplomacy for almost 10 years, and for the last 5 years, hardly a day has gone by where I was not participating in a match. As an online diplomacy expert, I can attest that I have experienced the problem you describe many times. I still do. And other players have told me about similar experiences, so I hope you feel reassured that you are not alone here. And of course, I wouldn't be BrotherBored if I didn't have advice to help you think through your problem. In this video, I've got 4 helpful tips. Tip number 1. Try mindfulness exercises. Mindfulness is a broad and ancient concept that I can neither fully define nor explore in this video. Mindfulness exercises are meditative or therapeutic techniques for bringing one's thought into the present moment. There are practitioners all over the world and from all walks of life. These techniques can help you with psychological problems, big and small. I learned and now practice mindfulness techniques as part of my never-ending project of self-improvement. I have dealt with distracting thoughts all my life. Mindfulness exercises are how I have started to break that habit. These techniques help me tranquilize intrusive thoughts related to diplomacy matches because they help me with any intrusive thoughts regardless of the source. You can find articles and videos all over the internet describing mindfulness exercises. I've listened to audio recordings that walk you through the steps. The gist of mindfulness exercises is that you can clear your mind by concentrating on the here and now. Consciously think about each breath you take. Listen for every little sound you hear in the room. Think about each part of your body and how it is postured and how it feels, one by one. Doing this for even a brief moment can clear your mind. Doing it for several minutes can almost put you to sleep. It sounds so simple, but just because the technique is simple does not mean it is obvious, easy, or lacking in value. In my many years' experience teaching players to be better at games, I have discovered a common psychological hurdle that the players I coach must clear. They overly focus on mastering the game itself instead of mastering general life skills that will also make them better at the game. Mindfulness exercises are a skeleton key for opening up all sorts of mental blocks. Maintaining your presence of mind is not just useful in warding off distracting thoughts about diplomacy when you're trying to sleep. It is also useful when you are upset by what another player has done and you feel too angry to concentrate. Presence of mind helps with almost anything that you might endeavor to do as a human being. So of course, it can help you in your approach to diplomacy. Tip number 2. Approach diplomacy differently. An online diplomacy match can take up to an hour or more of your time each day. Not only do you spend time thinking about your moves, you also have conversations with 6 other players. The other players could message you any hour of the day or night. And spending more effort reading and responding to those messages and spending more time thinking about your moves absolutely, for sure, increases your chances of winning. It could be, Deveron, that you find yourself thinking about your matches at inopportune times because you subconsciously appreciate that putting more effort into your matches could change the outcome for you. This seems likely to me because you said that you feel particularly distracted by critical moments in the game. There are other approaches to online diplomacy that are less demanding. One is to play with a no-press rule. This is called gunboat diplomacy. Another way is to play live games, such as real-time weekend tournaments. First, let's talk about gunboat. The label gunboat diplomacy is an allusion to the real-life historical phenomenon of imperial powers using armored warships called gunboats and the threat of violence to extort other nations. In other words, the phrase gunboat diplomacy is a bit of an oxymoron. I have played a lot of online gunboat diplomacy, and I can attest that this version of the game is much less time consuming and much less emotionally demanding. Because the players communicate just with their moves, there's no back and forth, time sensitive communication. You just look at the board, make up your mind, enter the orders, and wait for the next turn. The average turn takes me no more than 15 minutes. My other suggestion to you, Deveron, is to consider playing live games. A live match of diplomacy typically takes less than 4 hours, although matches lasting more than 7 hours are not uncommon. Your group might set a time or turn limit if you're worried about the match going on too long. Getting a group of 7 friends together to play live matches is not that easy. But if you reach out to the community of online players, you'll find that there are groups who consistently play live games, especially on evenings and weekends. Another option is to join live tournaments. Most tournaments begin and end in a single weekend, so you know for sure that you won't be distracted beyond that time commitment. Until the pandemic, I think it was fair to say that there was a barrier between the online community and the face-to-face community. But in 2020, that barrier has been broken. The face-to-face tournaments have been conducted online using video conferencing technology, creating an opportunity for these two distinct communities to play together. Switching to gunboat diplomacy or to live games is a great way to take a break from the time commitment involved with drawn-out online matches without missing out on diplomacy altogether. Which brings me to my next tip. Tip number 3. Take a break from diplomacy altogether. It's not just the time commitment that takes a toll. Diplomacy might be the most psychologically taxing and intense board game ever created. If you find that the first 2 tips aren't working for you, it might be time to take a break. Diplomacy, like any game people play for fun, should be an escape from life's harsher aspects, not a distraction from life's joys, like your family. If you're unable to tranquilize your mind through mindfulness exercises, or switching to a more relaxed style of play does not help, then it might be time to take a real break. There are plenty of games out there, many of which aren't nearly as demanding as diplomacy. And finally, tip number 4. Is this really a problem?
Okay, we're recording. We're recording now. Psst, we're recording.
What am I supposed to be doing in this scene?
I grow bored rather easily, and I get distracted by my own thoughts. Hence the moniker, your bored brother. Since childhood, I've been a daydreamer. If I'm doing something that requires little presence of mind, such as walking for exercise, I will probably get lost in my own thought. Sometimes I have a dialogue with an imaginary conversation partner. That's strange, like an imaginary friend. No, more like the mental exercise of imagining someone's responses to what I'm saying so that I challenge myself to think through my ideas. What's the point? How can you learn anything just talking to yourself? Well, to simulate the other person's dialogue in a realistic way, I must think from the other person's point of view. I gain better understanding of a different perspective and improve my own thinking. Well, that makes sense, but aren't you going off on a tangential topic in the middle of this video? Yes, you're right, thank you. I choose to play online diplomacy precisely because it gives me something to think about throughout my days. Thinking about an ongoing match is stimulating and harmless, and I often come up with ideas that I can put to use in the game. I believe that one of the reasons I am such a formidable diplomacy player is that I pour so much thought into my matches. In general, I try to keep my thinking on the brighter side of life, games, movies, philosophy, and my other interests. but I am a worldly and informed person, so my thinking can easily drift into worry about life's problems, the world's injustices, and so forth. I do what I can to help the world in my own way, but dwelling on upsetting thoughts rarely helps anybody. I suspect, Deveron, that since you're the kind of person who can be distracted during the day or kept awake at night by what transpires in an online board game, you might find yourself distracted by some other thought even if you weren't playing diplomacy. What a productive day. I finished my to-do list at work, I exercised, and I wrote a script for my video about distracting diplomacy thoughts. I sure am glad I am not distracted by thoughts about my own diplomacy matches tonight. Time for a good night's rest. Oh, I just thought of this. Wouldn't it be really funny to have a scene in my video where I'm unable to sleep because I can't stop thinking about making the video? I need to write this down before I forget. Ask yourself, Deveron, is there really something important you need to be thinking about, and you're unable to pay attention because diplomacy has so consumed your brain? If yes, then maybe you do have a problem and should consider the other tips I've offered you. But if the answer to that is no, that is to say, you're distracted by diplomacy because you have a wandering mind and diplomacy is interesting to think about, then maybe you're just fine. To me, thinking about diplomacy day and night is part of the fun. Thanks for your letter, Deveron. I hope you find my advice helpful. And now for the call to action.
Dear viewer, you made it all the way to the end of this video, so I presume you liked it. Maybe you're willing to help me out. On YouTube, there are 3 things you could do. 1, you could like the video. 2, you could comment on the video and say what you liked. And 3, you could subscribe to the channel. If you're willing to take another step, check out the description below and see my social media links. I've got Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you're willing to go one step further, you could send me some money. I have a Patreon account where people subscribe and send me money every month. Why don't you go on there as well? Even $1 would make a big difference to me. You could also check out my Ko-fi and send me a tip. I love getting tips. If you want to learn more, go to my website, BrotherBored.com. I have all kinds of stuff written about diplomacy, as well as other games, movies, and philosophy. Thanks for watching.